All right, all you IGNOU aspirants out there, welcome. Ever found yourself wondering, why does the government have to be so involved in education? Well, you've come to the right place. In this special explainer, we're going to break down everything you need to know about regulation in the education sector, so you can absolutely ace those exams. Let's dive right in. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the big why we need regulation at all. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of market failures and ethical failures. We'll look at what the regulator is trying to achieve, and we'll wrap it all up with a super fast revision to make sure these key concepts are locked in for your exam. All right, let's kick things off with the most fundamental question of all, the one that everything else is built on. Why do we even need to regulate education? So why can't we just let education be a free-for-all, like any other service on the market? Well, the simple answer, and this is the foundation for your entire exam response, is that an education market left completely to its own devices fails. It just doesn't deliver outcomes that are either fair or efficient for everybody. Now, this is super important. These failures basically break down into two main buckets you have to remember. On one hand, you've got market failure. This is all about efficiency. The market simply doesn't produce the right amount or the right quality of education. And on the other hand, you have ethical failure. This is an equity problem, meaning the market creates results that are just plain unfair. Let's dig into that first category, market failure. This is where we get into the pure economics of why regulation is so necessary. And hey, I've got a fantastic little trick for you to remember this in the exam hall. To keep the four main types of market failure straight, just think of the word PILL. That's P-I-L-L. It's a really easy way to structure your answer and make sure you hit all the key points. So let's break down what each of those letters means. Okay, so the P stands for positive externalities. Now this is a key piece of jargon, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It means that when someone gets an education, the benefits don't just stop with them, they spill over and benefit everyone else in society. That's why we call education a quasi-public good. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the core of the problem. Society gets all these amazing benefits, right? A workforce that's more innovative, higher productivity, a stronger democracy. But when individual families are making decisions, they're mostly thinking about the private benefits, like, will my child get a better salary? Because those huge social benefits aren't part of their calculation, the market as a whole invests way less in education than it should. And this visual just lays it all out perfectly. You see, the free market, just based on what individuals are willing to pay, only provides education up to level A. But what our society actually needs, when you factor in all those amazing social benefits, is level B. That massive gap between A and B, that's the underinvestment that the government has to step in and fix. Okay, on to the next letter in our PILL mnemonic, the I. And this one is all about information. Or, more specifically, the problems that happen when people don't have enough of it.
The AI stands for information asymmetry. Sounds complicated, right? But it's really just a fancy way of saying one side has an unfair information advantage. Just think about it. A school knows exactly how good its teachers are, what its real placement record looks like. But for a student or a parent trying to choose, it's almost impossible to know the real story from the outside.
And you see, this information gap creates all sorts of problems, like a domino effect. On the supply side, parents can't tell a great school from a terrible one. On the demand side, employers just use a degree as a simple filter because they have no way of knowing a candidate's actual skills. It even affects the credit market. Banks get nervous about giving out loans. The whole system gets clogged up with mistrust. So what does the government do? Well, this is where the regulator has to step in and act as a referee. They do things like setting up accreditation systems to ensure a basic level of quality. They force schools to disclose information and create public rankings, and they even back student loans to give banks more confidence. It's all about trying to level that information playing field. Okay, now for the two L's in our PILL. The first L stands for lack of competition. Let's be real. It costs a fortune to set up a top-quality university. You need labs, libraries, amazing professors. That creates a huge barrier, which means you end up with only a few high-quality providers. And what happens in a market with few sellers? You get a monopoly-like situation, which means higher fees and not enough seats for everyone. And that brings us to our final letter, the second L, which is for long gestation period. I mean, think about it. The money you spend on a child's kindergarten education might not show a real return for 15, maybe 20 years. Private investors, who are often focused on next quarter's profits, absolutely hate that kind of long-term risk. It's just another big reason why private markets alone can't do the job. Okay, so we have totally nailed market failures with our pill mnemonic. But you know what? That's only half the story. Now we need to look at the other major reason for regulation. And this one isn't about efficiency, it's about fairness. Ethical failure.
And this is such a huge point, because even if a market was perfectly efficient, it could still be incredibly unfair. First, you've got exclusion. If education is just another product you buy, then what happens if you can't afford it? You get left out. It's that simple. Second, it leads to the perpetuation of inequity. We talk about merit, but so often, merit is just a reflection of who can afford the best coaching and the best private schools. This can lock families into cycles of poverty or privilege for generations. And third, there's the principal-agent problem, where parents, the agents, might not, for various reasons, invest enough in the long-term future of their children, the principals. These are deep ethical problems that a free market just won't solve on its own.
So we've laid out all these problems, right? The market failures, the ethical failures. So what's the big picture here? What is the regulator ultimately trying to do? This quote from your study material really hits the nail on the head. The goal isn't to kill competition or to have total government control. It's actually a very delicate balancing act. The regulator tries to curb the bad parts of competition, like schools trying to exclude poor students, while encouraging the good parts, like schools competing to offer better quality. It's all about making the market work for everyone. All right, let's shift gears. Quick revision time, grab a pen, because these are the absolute must-knows for your exam. Let's do a rapid-fire review. First things first, the two big reasons for regulation. Remember these two pillars: market failure, which is about efficiency, and ethical failure, which is about equity. Every single argument for government intervention can be traced back to one of these two ideas. Next up, for market failures, your secret weapon is the pill mnemonic. But listen, don't just write down the letters in your exam answer. Make sure you can explain each one. Positive externalities, information asymmetry, lack of competition, and long gestation period. That's what shows you really understand the concepts. And finally, when a question pops up about fairness or social justice, these are the three key ideas you need to talk about: the exclusion of the poor, the way inequity can be passed down through generations, and the principal-agent problem. And I want to leave you with one final thought, something to really chew on that can make a fantastic conclusion for your exam answer. We know regulation is about balancing efficiency and equity, but for a developing country like India right now, which one should be the bigger priority? There's no easy answer, but exploring that tension will show the examiner you're thinking at a really high level. Good luck with your studies.